Right, good afternoon all. A very warm welcome to the latest in our series of webinars that relate to our UK RA Lessons Digest series. Um, there will be a Q&A session at the end. My name's Hamish. I'm the head of the UK Resilience Academy. And I just want to start by very briefly thank you all for making the time to join, but definitely thanking the speakers. We really appreciate you giving up the time for this because it's absolutely so important to hear your voices. So thank you so much. I'll also sneak in a thank you from my own team for organising this, not least Liana, who's the leading light behind the Digest series, these webinars, who you'll hear from in a little bit as well. And just a couple of domestics. Please put any questions in the chat. As I said, there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. And just note that this session is being recorded for those who can't meet it. So, with no further ado, I'll make a very warm introduction to Jonathan Ellison as our keynote speaker. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I can't think anybody better to lead off this session. Jonathan is the Director of National Resilience and Future Technology for the National Cyber Security Centre. Jonathan, over to you.
Good morning. $22 million. That's how much United Health Group paid the Black Cat ransomware group, a criminal gang, to restore their operations last year. £32.7 million. That was the estimated cost to Synovus of their cyber attack in 2024, according to press reporting. 6 weeks. That was how long Marks and Spencer's online orders were offline following their recent cyber incident. 40%. The reported proportion of the British Library's financial reserves that were used to recover from their ransomware attack in October 2023, according to press reporting. 700. The reported number of jobs lost when KMP Logistics Group went into insolvency, cited as a result of a cyber incident, a ransomware attack suffered 3 months earlier. And 12%. The figure that companies experiencing a ransomware attack over the last 2 years have underperformed the Nasdaq by, according to research by Comparitech. So, good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Ellison. I'm the National Resilience Director at the UK's National Cyber Security Centre. We're the National Technical Authority for Cyber Security and the lead operational department for cyber across government, and we're part of GCHQ, the UK's Intelligence, Cyber and Security Agency. I had the privilege of writing the foreword for the recent digest, Learning from Cyber Incidents, and I've got the privilege right now of opening today's webinar. Cyber is a critical issue that deserves national attention and the attention of all organisations, all companies, big or small. When things go wrong, it can have really profound consequences. United Health Group's Change Healthcare, which I mentioned in the introduction, a company that provides essential payment and reimbursement services, recently faced a massive data breach. And according to that press reporting, they paid a staggering $22 million ransom to the Black Cat ransomware group, a criminal gang, to restore their operations. And despite that hefty payment, the fallout from the attack continued for months. It disrupted patient care, insurance submissions, billing processes. Much closer to home, back in June last year, a Russian hacking gang targeted Synovus. They are a contractor that provides blood testing, transfusion, and other pathology services to the National Health Service. The breach crippled Synovus's ability to function. It led to months of disruption at hospitals and doctors' surgeries, and it's reported that medical facilities postponed over 10,000 appointments and cancelled more than 1,700 elective procedures as a result of the incident. And the estimated cost of that cyber attack was £32.7 million, as I already mentioned. And to put that in context, it outstripped Synovus's profits of £4.3 million in 2023, according to their accounts filed at Companies House. And of course, much more recently, our inability to buy our favourite goods from Marks and Spencer's, the disruption caused to the Co-op and Harrods, are really good examples of the impact that cyber attacks can have on our day-to-day lives, our ability to buy the products and services that we depend upon. So these stories all illustrate the profound impact that cyber attacks can have on businesses and on public services alike, operationally and financially. They disrupt operations, they can compromise sensitive data, they can incur financial costs. And whilst I've used criminality, cybercriminality, to illustrate how easy it is to cause impact to your bottom line, to your customers, to your share price, to your operations, other, in some cases much more capable, threat actors are also available. So for example, China. The PRC continues to be a highly sophisticated, capable threat actor. It targets a wide range of sectors and institutions across the globe, including in the UK. In February last year, we, with some of our international counterparts, talked publicly about compromises of US critical infrastructure by Volt Typhoon, a China state-sponsored threat actor. The targeting of energy, transportation, water sectors could be laying the groundwork for future disruptive and destructive cyber attacks, and it's a clear warning about China's intent to threaten essential networks. Academic research into victims of cyber attacks, ransomware and elsewhere, as well as incident reporters, reveals wide-ranging consequences that are physical, financial, reputational, psychological, and social harms. In some cases, the attacks have been so severe that organizations have been forced to cease operations. There can be high cost to clients of businesses, public bodies, from the closure of disruption of services. And when healthcare or transport services are affected, the impact spills over into public health and daily life as well. So the cancellation of appointments or key services. Attacks can undermine confidence in online services and the broader digital economy. So it's great that you're here today, that we're here today to talk about the impact of cyber attacks, but really crucially, the lessons we can learn and what we can do about it. So I thought I'd end this introduction with my top 3 learnings from the incidents we see at the National Cybersecurity Centre. The first is around governance and leadership. Board engagement is absolutely key. No board or chief exec should be thinking cyber risk doesn't apply to them. Boards need to ensure that cybersecurity is a regular agenda item. Senior leaders should be actively involved in overseeing cyber risk management and making informed decisions based on up-to-date threat intelligence. Your board should be as cyber literate as it is financially literate. My second lesson builds on that. And that's about how we prioritize cyber risk management. And we need to prioritize it like we prioritize other business and mission critical risks. So that means conducting regular cyber risk assessments to identify and prioritize potential threats, and making sure that we don't restrict that to the technology estate that is unique to just your company or organization, but about third-party risk management too. So evaluating the cybersecurity practices of third-party vendors and partners, ensuring that they meet your organization's security standards, and including cyber requirements in contracts. It's really key. The cybersecurity is not a tech issue. It's a risk management one. We know what the technical solutions are to the vast majority of this. So this isn't technically challenging. It's about understanding risk, it's about managing risk, and it's about investing where it is appropriate to do so. And my final lesson is about planning for when the defenses don't work or your strategy hasn't succeeded. We talk a lot at NCSC about the need to continue and recover. So incident response plans, business continuity planning are key, but don't think that this is just about restoring IT. Think about how you keep your business going in the weeks and potentially months you may be without core IT infrastructure. Please don't be one of the boards that I speak to where they encounter ransomware, for example, for the first time when it happens to you or part of your supply chain. We speak to too many companies, boards, chief execs, whereby they only engage with this issue when the attack is ongoing or has already succeeded in knocking out their business. So the recent attacks, the recent events in the retail sector need to serve as a wake-up call. Whether or not you're a large or a small organization, whether or not you're in the public or the private sector, whether or not you're critical infrastructure or not, these kinds of incidents can happen to you. The impact can be significant and in some cases enduring. So our macro lessons from cyber incidents are taking cybersecurity seriously now, not after the event. And that means good risk management, board level attention, and making sure you plan to continue and recover when the worst happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that excellent keynote, and really great to hear some of those lessons right at the end that you leave us with. Thank you very much for your insights, for your time, and for being with us here today to open up the session. Well, I'm so glad that so many of you have joined us to explore this important topic as we look at cyber resilience and specifically some of the lessons that have come from some very well-known cyber incidents that have taken place, some less known, but of equal importance. And it's my pleasure to introduce myself. I'm Leanna Roast, and the first thing that I'm going to do is something that I always do when we start one of these webinars, and give a very, very brief introduction to the digest. We know that now it's in its 6th edition, that many people are aware of what it is and what it does, but I'm aware that every time we have a thematic leading that might bring new people towards the product, which is fantastic and online. And equally, it is the first one from the UK Resilience Academy, which I'm very pleased has been presented in its new and updated format. By all means, let us know what you think of that format. Does it work? Has it been onwards and upwards, or is there other things we could do? We continually evolve the digest to keep it relevant for those who we hope will read it and engage with the webinar. The purpose of the digest, if learning from cyber incidents was the first time that you came across it, was really to help strengthen societal resilience. It was based on a lesson, lessons itself, that there was difficulty sharing nationally to locally in terms of some of the lessons that were coming through, but also the time pressure that's on us as a resilience community to try and absorb so many reports and so many lessons and recommendations that come from a range of sources. So it does sit at the heart of a programme of work here at UKRA, and it's absolutely about synthesising and sharing those lessons from major exercises and emergencies. And this is demonstrated across our 3 objectives, which every digest works to meet, which is to summarise transferable lessons. That's lessons that have applicability from one context to another, or perhaps from one risk to another, and the themes from a range of relevant sources. Share those lessons across responder organisations and wider resilience partners, and then also, crucially, coordinate knowledge to help drive that continual improvement across the sector. And that really gives us the opportunity to draw in experiences, expertise, case studies in support of the theme of each edition. And I'm so glad that our guest speakers are here today, having guest authored the articles in Learning from Cyber Incidents. Just moving on, you will be able to see, if you pick up a digest, that we have placed high emphasis on making sure that it is applicable to practice. We know that the digest as a learning product can't learn a lesson for anyone or for any organisation, but it can put information and tools in the hands of those who need them. And that's very much what we hope we're helping to do again today. You will see throughout the digest, which you can download from the UKRA website, that it's full of resources. It also has sidelights, which are there to give an optional extra insight into something that's some of the content that's on that page, and make it active boxes, which provide suggestions for how to put the learning into practice. If you do want to download that, I just thought I'd get in here a quick map of the website. You want to click on the share icon on the top right, and you can see the Lessons Digest down there. And you'll be pleased to know, for those who've been following the digest for a while, all of the previous issues, which were published under Emergency Planning College as was, are also available there for you. So in terms now of our session as we move on today, I'm going to continue in just a moment to provide an overview of the learning analysis that was done in support of this edition. After that, we're going to be moving on to Councillor Alex Coley from a local government association, who's going to talk about minimising cyber impact in local government. We'll then move to Adam Bland, Senior Associate UKRA, who is going to tell us about his experience of working through the WannaCry cyber attack. And then we will hand to Di Cooke, our esteemed researcher from King's College London, who is going to present to us on how we can build resilience against AI-enabled deception. And at the end, there will be time for some questions, and the guest speakers will join us on the panel. So as Hamish said right at the top of the session, if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat. Our team are very efficiently collecting them as they go in there. And we'll look forward to answering some of them at the end. Diving straight into the analysis, we always use a qualitative metasynthesis for this work, given the nature and differences between the various reports, case studies, audits, and reviews that come into that analysis. In this case, we use 7 documents, and these attacks span the WannaCry attack on NHS England, the Equifax breach, the Marriott Hotel attack, an issue with ransomware in the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, case studies from Gloucester City Council and St Helens Borough Council, and also the recent ransomware attack on the British Library. Each were high profile, but clearly there we've got a range of cyber vectors that were used in each case, and also it's sectorally diverse. They're from the last 6 years, or within a 6-year period, apologies, but do all have some direct or indirect impacts for UK citizens, services, or businesses. And brought together, they totaled 100 findings, lessons and recommendations for our review. In terms of what that revealed, as we move on to the next slide, we'll see that there were emerging learning themes, which are the broad areas that the lessons fell into. Josh, if I could have that next slide, that would be fabulous. Thank you. Thank you so much. These were the most prominent learning themes arising. Cybersecurity and hygiene came in top, but a very close second was planning and preparedness. Behind that, we had cyber incident management, which encompasses the entire range of preparing for, preventing, responding to, recovering from cyber incidents. Specifically, there was then challenges in recovery, and finally, IT infrastructure issues and governance. If we move on to the next slide, what we will do here is just start to pull out some of the key things from each of those themes. And if you want the lessons in detail, there's a table of transferable lessons that might be applicable, that can certainly be applied in your context and might be particularly applicable depending on the nature of the lesson. That can be seen within the digest. In the resources section, we've also compiled this table so that it can be taken in isolation and perhaps reviewed in line with your risk assessments or other work that you might be doing to strengthen cyber resilience in your context. The first theme on cybersecurity hygiene will probably not be a surprise to anyone on the call. This cybersecurity hygiene refers to the basic routine practices that help maintain the health and security of an IT system. In each case, there were very basic measures that could have reduced the severity of an incident's impacts or even mitigated the attack altogether. Patches were often available. Multi-factor authentication was sometimes available and not used appropriately, sometimes not turned on. And often we saw issues of outdated software or outdated software that had been inherited through procurement processes. It was quite stark reading the reports that there were so many small things that could have made such a big difference. And I think it's important to recognise the challenges and the barriers to performing a lot of those really basic measures to help protect ourselves in this area, such as updating software. We all know the busyness that we work in and the pressure often in different contexts, and it can be difficult to take the time to restart your machine and the rebooting that it requires. But in fact, in some cases, it can be absolutely critical. And thank you so much. I've just seen that question pop up. Patching is when there's a known vulnerability in the software. They've identified an issue which could allow a hacker or cyber criminal to gain access to the system. And so engineers will come up essentially with a little bit like a plaster. That's probably a poor way of describing it. And one of my guest speakers will do it far more eloquently in their presentations to come. But you can apply that to mend the problem that you've already found. So in those cases, that's where known fixes were not applied. The second theme, moving on, was planning and preparedness. And actually this centered around three things: basic training And the training was not necessarily absent. That's the important thing. A lot of organisations had access to basic cyber training. What had changed, however, was the scale and nature of the threat, and that had been insufficiently realised, appreciated, and applied in the training packages, meaning that that it was underappreciated in the planning that they'd done and in the day-to-day business of the organisation. That had a knock-on effect for the planning for a cyber incident. So the breadth, depth, and longevity of an incident's impacts actually was not taken into account, and the plans didn't go far enough. And what we saw in all of these reports repeatedly was that the impact far exceeded the organisation's expectations and planning assumptions. And as a knock-on effect of that, there was also an over-reliance or backstop reliance on more generalised business continuity or disaster recovery plans, which are absolutely worth having in all cases. But this really was a recognition from the reports that it wasn't enough, that cyber did have some nuances, some of them technical, but equally some of them in terms of the direct kind of common consequences just associated with that particular kind of risk that needed looking at. And overall, all of those things combined impacted the extent and effectiveness of cyber incident exercising. As we move on to themes 3 and 4, we pick up here cyber incident management. And this was where there were some nuances that's specific to the threat, notably where the cyber response plans were stored electronically on a system that was hacked, which may seem obvious as we recount it now, and yet it's really important to remember these kind of measures that we can take place to back it up elsewhere. It also made the usual communication during a crisis incident, which is always a challenge in any situation, additionally challenging, because it impaired situational awareness. People couldn't message each other on Teams, use their emails. Ordinary channels were inhibited or impaired, and that made everything about communication that's already often challenging even more so. The management of the incident was also exacerbated by a well-known tactic that cyber attackers may use, which is delivering the attack just before or in a holiday period or over a weekend, so that in some cases, actually, there was issues identifying that attack was even taking place, and it was allowed to be unknown for a little while before they were able to start mitigating the impact and making a response. The recovery challenges came out clearly in theme 4. This particularly spoke to two things. The technical side, in terms of backups being stored on the systems affected, along with the response plans, rather than having an alternative place for the backup where it could not be impacted directly by the attack, but also a lack of a data asset register, which meant that when people came to back up data, they actually weren't sure what they had originally had or what they should be restoring. This was a challenge and is something that all of us can put in place easily before to know what we have and where we have it when we're storing information electronically. The second thing is a particularly interesting point, and one I'm sure that some of our speakers will come to as we go on through the session, was the nature of cyber incidents and the impact that has on recovery. Traditionally, and this particularly came out of the report following the WannaCry attack on the NHS, major incidents tend to be either very intense, such as a road traffic accident, but over in a limited time period, or long-lasting but slow-moving, such as strike action. But cyber attacks actually have the potential to be both highly intense and long-running, which places a really unique and challenging strain on the human resources employed to respond to them. Finally, theme 5 and 6 were less prevalent, but of significant importance. In terms of infrastructure, legacy systems, we're all aware that old IT that can't quite be protected in the way that new IT can, or doesn't quite work coherently with other systems, can be really a difficult issue. Difficult to not only maintain it and keep it up to date, if that's possible, but also to secure it. Some of the reports highlighted the impact that custom applications could bring. And that meant that when they were looking to the backup processes and to restore or to even access some of the custom content, there was a need to engage with varied consultants who had helped to build them, but who perhaps were not even involved in the organisation any longer. So a challenge there. And finally, poor network segmentation, which essentially was about grouping areas of the network together to help make it more difficult for criminals to move from one area of the computer network to another. That often caused a lot of problems, enabling the attackers to get further and farther faster than the organisation would have wanted or anticipated. And finally, cyber governance. Leadership, and Jonathan has already said this, and I do think it will be coming out as one of the key themes in this, is absolutely critical to ensuring that the organisation has the understanding, the expert oversight in terms of potentially IT specialists on retainer, etc., and a cultural emphasis in cybersecurity that underpin that effective approach to cyber resilience. Their training, their understanding of the threat, and their personal engagement with the cyber resilience across the organisation. So those were the 6 top themes with some brief highlights. But as I do say, please go and read the digest, download it from the website. We'll pop the link in the chat, and you'll be able to explore those themes a little more easily and fully. That's it from me for now, but I am absolutely delighted and honoured to introduce Councillor Alex Coley, Deputy Chair of the Improvement and Innovation Board at the Local Government Association, who is going to present on Beyond Prevention and how we can minimise cyber impact in government, and specifically local government. Alex, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Leanna. As you said, I'm Alex Coley, Deputy Chair of the Improvement and Innovation Board at the Local Government Association, and my board is responsible for oversight of cyber, digital and technology in the local government sector. My own personal experience, I've been a digital civil servant. My team built the pandemic flu service in 2009, if you remember swine flu. I was the first head of digital at Scotland Yard, and I've been a digital consultant with multiple London councils, as well as being a councillor. I was also the digital lead at the Grenfell response team. I'm here to talk about how cyber attacks are no longer a matter of if or when, but often how often for local government. Recent attacks on Gloucester and Hackney highlight the need for urgent need for a greater focus on impact mitigation. And you may have seen this week, there's also been a cyber incident at Glasgow City Council. Now, in the Gloucester case, they were hit by a sophisticated ransomware attack in December 2021, initiated through a spear phishing email that led to malware deployment and data exfiltration. That attack significantly disrupted critical council services, including benefit payments and planning, with some systems taking up to a full year for full restoration. The council chose a complete system rebuild and migration to cloud-hosted solutions rather than paying the ransom, aiming for enhanced security and resilience. Key lessons included the necessity of a specific cyber incident plan, enhanced staff training on cyber threats, and careful engagement with external suppliers. The incident incurred over £1.1 million in costs and involved the potential exfiltration of approximately 240,000 files, though law enforcement indicated a low risk of publication. Beyond local government, even national institutions like Transport for London and the British Library have been attacked, demonstrating increased sophistication and frequency of those attacks. The critical importance of impact mitigation, in addition to prevention, is something else that I'd like to talk about. So while preventative controls like firewalls, segregation, training are all vital, eliminating all vulnerabilities is impossible. Councils must prioritise impact mitigation to build true resilience. This involves robust crisis management, incident response, disaster recovery and business continuity planning. But it can also involve architectural design. We saw in Gloucester that they chose a complete system rebuild and migration to cloud-hosted solutions. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in is the challenge and the balance between a standardized versus a bespoke IT setup for the recovery. So when we talk about impact mitigation and recovery, off-the-shelf or bespoke becomes paramount. So this choice significantly impacts how quickly and effectively you can respond to and recover from an incident, particularly when considering the twin challenges of complexity and technical debt. So with off-the-shelf solutions, standardized systems often have well-documented architecture and known fixes. You get an element of predictability with them. However, widely used systems can be targeted by a greater number of threat actors. Vulnerability in one widely used component can affect many organizations simultaneously, as we saw with Log4j. With bespoke IT, highly customized systems are inherently more complex. It's incredibly difficult to understand the full scope of a compromise, identify all affected components, or pinpoint the root cause, especially if internal documentation is lacking. Legacy technology, which we often see in local government, is often managed through poor documentation and custom security features that are hard to integrate with modern tools. Highly customized systems and architectures, like we see across local government, can be significantly more difficult to recover effectively. The more complex and unique your IT environment, the greater the technical debt, and the harder it will be to get back on your feet quickly after an attack. This translates directly to longer downtime, higher costs, and more disruption for your residents. Local government is a prime target for cyber criminals. We hold a treasure trove of sensitive data, ranging from social care records to financial information. And the critical nature of council services demands uninterrupted operation, amplifying the potential impact of disruption from an attack. The Gloucester incident, where full system and service restoration took 4 months, exemplifies the potential for significant disruption. And when I reflect on my own council in Epsom and Ewell, a small district council, we don't have the resourcing, the capability to do everything on our own. We really depend on a sector-wide approach where we can think about advice from other councils, advice from the LGA, learning from other people, because with 300 and something plus councils, you can't do everything on your own. You really need to depend on working together across the whole sector so that you can learn and be resilient as a network, as a sector, as an association, rather than just lots of small orgs trying to do their own thing. When we learn from cyber incidents, we do have a shared experience approach. So the LGA has championed the secure use of digital technology in councils since 2019. And the LGA has compiled cyber incident case studies, which you can see on local.gov.uk, our website, such as the one discussed in this article, where we share experiences and learning amongst local government. And this approach helps councils understand and implement effective mitigation measures based on real-world scenarios. Effective mitigation requires understanding and assessing assets, identifying critical data, and implementing clear ownership for security. I'm just going to return briefly now to some of the experiences I've had when I've worked in digital cyber attacks. When we built the pandemic flu service in DirectGov, if you remember the big orange website, we were actually repurposing something that the NHS used for a heart attack service. So if you thought you were having some kind of heart incident, you could use it. And that was completely repurposed for pandemic flu service to get Tamiflu. And you find very quickly you're inheriting a lot of the processes that were already there. We were then transferring that to Akamai servers, which are much more resilient. And that was a significant retrofit to make that work and make that secure. When I was the head of digital at the Met Police, we were responsible for, my team, I was responsible for online crime reporting, anti-terrorist reporting, and the National Police Extranet. So we were expecting to be targeted every day by cyber criminals. And our relationship with our suppliers, our relationships internally too, were crucial to making sure that we had a really resilient service. I mentioned that I was a digital consultant too on a number of London councils. When I led the digital team for Grenfell response, we had a denial of service attack in the first week on our infrastructure, which had been spun up specifically to produce an online service at that time. And we were very lucky, actually, that the infrastructure provider was able to combat that in 37 minutes. We got the service back up and running again. And that was not expected. We did not expect to be targeted that quickly with a DDoS attack. So we were quite fortunate we were able to actually counter that problem and deal with it as we did. And it just goes to show that whatever you're doing, whether you're in a crisis, whether you're building something over the space of a weekend, you have to factor this in as you go. I'll save anything more for the Q&A because I think there'll probably be quite a few questions about local government. But for now, thank you, and looking forward to taking questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was really informative and some really important points raised there too. Yeah, please do put your questions for Alex in the chat and we will be scooping those up as we go along. Thank you. I'm now pleased to introduce Adam Bland, Senior Associate at the UK Resilience Academy. And Adam has contributed an article from experience as well, coming off the back of what Councillor Coley has mentioned there about his own experience, and gives us some personal reflections on cyber incident readiness and response. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you, and I hand the floor to you.
Leanna, thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to contribute to the digest. Another great edition, so well done team for that, and also to support this webinar as well. And it won't surprise you if you've read the report, colleagues, that I'm going to be saying actually some things that have already been said, because there are some common themes across what's happening. So a little bit about me, background in primarily health service resilience, increasingly multi-agency resilience, now working as an associate with the UK RA and independently, and actually now spend quite a lot of time supporting organisations to understand their cyber risk, not from a particularly technical perspective, but actually, as we've heard already, from understanding the impact on the organisation and how we integrate our generic and traditional emergency arrangements with the threat of cyber. And I can see, it's lovely to see some familiar names on the call. Some of you lived through WannaCry as I did. I know you were there. Some of you have the challenges of trying to get this integrated into your emergency arrangements. So a little bit about WannaCry. And it's probably actually worth noting that tomorrow will be the 8th anniversary of not WannaCry, but NotPetya. And we sometimes forget about that. NotPetya was targeted at organisations working in Ukraine. WannaCry was not targeted, but the NHS was significantly affected. So just a few thoughts. You can read more in the digest. But the WannaCry attack, the vulnerability on the technology within Microsoft was known, and we've already talked about patching, that basic cyber hygiene, but a patch was available for this. And had that been applied across all the organisations that were affected, they wouldn't have been affected. And it really is as fundamental as that. So if you'd applied patches consistently, then actually you weren't affected directly by the infection of WannaCry. It's worth noting, as many of us had up until 2017, responded to a whole raft of emergencies. Lots of things on the community risk registers driven from the national risk registers. And although cyber was on there, the scale and impact of what we saw in WannaCry was not well understood, not well assessed, and not well documented. And I think I put in the report, and I was with Jonathan talking about boards. I was with a board yesterday, helping them to understand how they could get a real grip on governance around cyber using the NCSC board toolkit and the new code of practice from colleagues in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology in NCSC, and that actually understanding that at a board level was really key. And one of the things I said yesterday, and I put in the digest, is a real frustration. Actually, I enjoy talking about this. It's still cathartic even now. But colleagues, this was 8 years ago, and so there is something about the persistence of not learning these lessons. And those of you that work in resilience and emergency planning will recognise that frustration, not just for cyber, but a whole raft of other things as well. So I've just got a few minutes. I just wanted to touch on some of my personal reflections around the readiness, and then go on to talk about the response. And again, I haven't seen what other people are going to say, but there really is an urgency to this. Alex talked there about not when, not if, but how often. I've started saying it's not about when and if, it's about now. You don't know that there aren't hackers in your system today, right now. And so we need to make sure that if we have not got those robust, resilient response arrangements in place, that needs to be a focus, a priority for resourcing, priority for teams in order to know that we are ready when this happens. And that's about ensuring that is integrated. Talk a little bit about that again. And actually, when you find yourself then suspecting, not being able to rule out a cyber element to what you're dealing with, there's a real sense of urgency in the response to go big, go fast, to use the sort of American FEMA post Katrina phrase. It really is to go big and go fast, and to scale back if it's then subsequently not needed on that scale. The speed with which infections and hackers spread across networks is just phenomenal. And so then when we get to response, we need to make sure that our teams, in the same way as Jonathan was talking about boards, actually all of our teams know enough about cyber resilience. Recently been delivering training sort of cyber for non-cyber people. It's about ensuring that your teams who will be part of a response to any emergency have enough of an understanding about the cyber threats, the cyber impacts, the things that are in your toolbox, but also ensuring that you've got access to those SMEs. And so the flip side to that is ensuring that your SMEs, your subject matter experts in IT, in cyber resilience, in your supply chain, that they know enough about the structures for your emergency response arrangements, crisis management arrangements, because they're going to be working in this unusual, potentially unusual environment in the same way as you're going to be working with potentially an unusual risk. And it's really important that those two work well together. For WannaCry, those of us that lived through that, we didn't have specific plans and playbooks for a cyber attack on a single NHS organisation. Certainly wasn't anything, as you can read in the NHS England report that was published shortly afterwards. There wasn't a national coordination plan for this. What we had was our universal approaches, the structures of strategic, tactical, and operation, the role of local resilience forums and partnerships for colleagues in Scotland and emergency preparedness groups in Northern Ireland, those fundamental principles. And importantly for me, in terms of the documents I was relying on and that would then justify my decisions after the event, it was the principles of JESIP. And people say to me, well, Adam, JESIP's about casualty incidents, about multi-agency incidents. Yes, initially, but they're universal approaches that work. The JESIP principles of co-location, communication, coordination, joint understanding, risk, shared situation awareness tell me where cyber doesn't fit within there. The use of methane, it doesn't take much tweaking for that to be your common building tool for situational awareness, to then share that very quickly, particularly thinking if your normal communication routes aren't available. The fact that people are recognizing and expecting methane, use it for cyber. That's a bit of a whistle stop tour through there. I'm just making sure I've covered everything that was on my notes. In terms of the urgency piece, we also need to make sure that the plethora of strategies and reviews that have come out, even just in the last few weeks, that we're looking at those as individual organisations across our multi-agency forums, and importantly, as Alex was saying, in terms of our sectors, ensuring that the risks, the threats, as they continue to emerge and exponentially increase with the geopolitics, that actually all of that, we understand the requirements of those, and that we're building them in. I think, Josh, that's all I was going to say in that, and I'm happy to take questions at the end of the session in the Q&A. So thank you again for the opportunity, and good luck in planning, responding and recovering from this particular threat.
Thank you, Adam. That was really interesting and informative, and I'm sure there will be some questions for you later on. Thank you. Please do put any of those in the chat and we'll pick them up. Thank you, Adam. That's great. I'm now really pleased to introduce our next speaker, Di Cooke. She's an AI fellow at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies and also a researcher at King's College London. And we're really fortunate to have her here to be able to talk about how we can build resilience against AI-enabled deception, something that we all need to be aware of. Di, it's a pleasure to have you on the call. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand over to you.
Good afternoon. As Leanna said, I'm Di Cooke. I'm a researcher, and my work focuses on the AI threat landscape and its implications for national security. Thanks again to Leanna and the rest of the UK Resilience Academy team for inviting me to contribute to the inaugural issue of the Digital Defense and to speak here today. I think we are going to start off by showing a quick video clip of an example of what AI can do, just to kind of give you a hands-on example of just how good this technology has gotten. So Joshua, if you wanted to start that, and take a look. And that's just a little sample to give you a taster of just how advanced some of this technology has gotten. As you can see, it's pretty difficult to tell the difference. I know when I first saw this, I think my success rate was about 50%, and I look at this kind of stuff all the time. So, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. Anyway, just to clarify before we dive in, since I'll refer to deepfakes as synthetic content or synthetic media. And essentially what this is AI created text, images, audio, or video produced by a specific type of AI called generative AI. And as I was saying, a more casually and widely known term for these outputs would be deepfakes. So during the course of the presentation, I'll be discussing three critical topics. One is the rapidly evolving synthetic content threat landscape. Two are ways in which generative AI technology is revolutionizing cyber attacks to an unprecedented degree. And then three is how do we deploy a multi-layered resilience framework to mitigate these harms posed by weaponized synthetic content. And a lot of what I'll be saying echoes what the previous speakers had discussed, which is great, means we're all aligned. But we'll be looking specifically at how do you address AI-enabled cyber attacks. But just to dive in, so with the public release of ChatGPT, which is a generative AI technology tool, heralding the start of this generative AI boom in 2022, interest in harnessing the power of synthetic content has just skyrocketed worldwide. Although there are several anticipated benefits to this technology, from vital healthcare research to economic innovation, the rapid advancement of Gen AI has also made it an increasingly potent tool for harm that has been weaponized by threat actors globally. And this is due to the growing accessibility and affordability of Gen AI tools, the dramatically improved realism of their outputs, and the decreased data requirements for creating convincing fakes, including those impersonating real people. So to put it simply, Gen AI is an enabling tool that enhances the sophistication, scale, and speed of threat actors' attacks. People have generally most often heard about weaponized synthetic content in the context of attempts to manipulate election outcomes, particularly last year, where I think we had a record number of elections being held worldwide. But in truth, election interference is really only the tip of the iceberg. And there are many other domains where synthetic content misuse is proliferating, from financial fraud to espionage to hate crimes to a number of other malicious acts. Already, weaponized synthetic media has led to hundreds of millions of pounds in financial fraud, with experts estimating an impact of 40 billion losses predicted by 2027. It has led to psychological trauma and social impacts to millions of adult and child victims of non-consensual intimate imagery, particularly women, and has led to exacerbating the erosion of public trust in institutions as people can no longer distinguish real from fake. And this is a phenomenon called truth decay. And now we're going to talk a little bit about AI-enabled cyber attacks in particular. So Gen AI has especially been weaponized for cyber attacks at an unprecedented scale and sophistication, with AI actively enhancing multiple cyber threat vectors, such as different types of phishing, DDoS attacks, insider threats, malware, ransomware, the creation of AI cybercrime tools, and more. For example, email phishing attacks have found to have surged 1,000% between 2022 and 2024 due to AI tools, with AI being able to write convincingly realistic and highly customized emails in only minutes, letting amateurs launch personalized scams at scale that bypass traditional warning signs. At the same time, the volume of AI voice and video phishing attacks has also exploded in recent years, with threat actors impersonating trusted colleagues, family members, fake kidnappers, love interests, foreign politicians, and interest groups over voice and video calls, to name a few. Targets have included financial institutions, C-suite executives, government officials, and private citizens, with the number of these attacks only expected to grow. Meanwhile, AI-enabled DDoS attacks, or denial of service attacks, are able to flood websites with fake traffic that looks exactly like real visitor traffic, making it incredibly hard for cybersecurity systems to detect and respond to. In addition, AI has also enabled DDoS attacks of unprecedented size and scale, which are also even harder to address. Last year, we saw a surge in AI-enabled insider threats, such as a widespread North Korean campaign where North Korean operatives were discovered to be using synthetic photos, voices, and real-time face and voice filters to pass background checks and video interviews in an attempt to infiltrate over 150 companies as remote IT workers for espionage purposes. And some of these individuals were even hired and then later found to have been trying to install malware for data exfiltration. Gen AI also enables incredibly advanced malware like async rat, which was identified last year as one of the top 10 most harmful malwares globally, that continuously mutates while maintaining functionality, generating thousands of variants that evade signature detection. And this kind of self-modifying code powered by AI makes traditional antiviruses much less effective. And so these are all examples of actual incidences that have happened over the past few years. But I'm sure just from discussing these, you can imagine a number of hypothetical scenarios where these types of technology can be used in other ways and even together to create some pretty scary hypothetical scenarios about how this could be used in the future to, engage in cyber attacks. A couple examples might be, let's say, during a cost of living debate, MPs start to receive personalized emails from constituents describing heartbreaking situations specific to their constituencies. These AI-crafted messages include local details straight from social media and end with links to supporting documents that actually lead to credential harvesting sites, mimicking parliamentary IT portals. Another scenario could be an AI voice imposter of a senior local government official calling junior staff after hours, claiming to be traveling and needing urgent access to briefing materials for a quote-unquote emergency meeting, and then telling the junior staffers to send those materials to a personal email address immediately because of the pressing the pressing nature of the situation. Another scenario might be, following a major incident, AI-directed botnets target Gov AI emergency information portals and NHS digital services. And these attacks mimic normal citizen behavior, but overwhelm the system, making it impossible to block without denying real citizens access during a crisis. So now that we've walked through all the real and imagined kind of horrifying incidences of how AI-enabled cyber attacks can be used, we're going to talk about how do we build resilience against these. And so what can we do to protect ourselves from falling victim to these kinds of attacks? And so the answer to this is actually there's quite a lot of things we can do. So it's quite reassuring. And many of which have already actually been discussed and recommended by previous speakers and the UK resilience team during this webinar. So we'll be going over some of these again. Some of these will be a little familiar. But just to continue the theme, I've categorized the different recommendations by the 6 lessons learned in the digital digest, which will be helpful because then it makes some of these more familiar as well. However, before we dive in, I briefly wanted to touch on the topic of AI detection tools, as I get a lot of questions about their utility for addressing AI-enabled cyber attacks all the time. And I have to say that in my line of work, I've personally tested several commercial detection tools of varying descriptions, and not one has stood up beyond very limited testing and are very easy to break. So despite the marketing hype, I cannot recommend including AI detection tools at this moment in current resilience frameworks, as they create a dangerous false sense of security. However, that is not to say I don't think we should be looking to AI detection tools and other technical solutions at all. I think there should be a lot more research dedicated to this space, as having a set of technical countermeasures is going to be critical to ensure long-term resilience. But let's dive into the different lessons and recommendations. So pillar 1, cybersecurity and hygiene, which is the foundational pillar, is critical. Even the most sophisticated AI attacks often fail against basic security fundamentals. A perfect deepfake is worthless without system access. So before anything else, make sure you've implemented fundamental security practices, such as those that previous speakers mentioned, to create barriers that prevent AI-enabled attacks from succeeding, even when deepfakes convince targets to share credentials accidentally. Next is to establish multi-channel verification for high-risk communications, such as confirming an email request in person, or over the phone, as this forces attackers to attempt to maintain deception across multiple channels simultaneously, which exponentially increases difficulty and cost for the attack and drastically increases the likelihood of the attack failing. Finally, it's recommended to add additional verification protocols, including establishing code words or challenge questions with key staff to verify their identity, particularly during high-risk communications, as well as doing things like conducting liveliness detection tests, such as requiring unpredictable movements during a video call if you feel suspicious about who's on the other end. The important thing here to keep in mind is that a lot of these attack vectors, you yourself are going to be the target. And so thinking through how you're going to actively defend against this is a pretty critical theme that runs through all of these pillars. So pillar 2 is planning and preparation. So how do we build awareness? And understanding AI capabilities helps transform natural skepticism into a structured defense, allowing people to become the strongest link rather than the weakest. So this means, first, it's important to ensure you and your team, not just your SMEs in IT and digital services staff, are at least generally educated on Gen AI capabilities, what is and what is not possible for the technology to do. This is because for many attack vectors, you're going to be the target, as I mentioned before. By not understanding AI capabilities, even robust technical defenses risk failing when the individuals unknowingly circumvent them or fail to report suspicious content. Next, make sure to have pre-established response plans in place with clear escalation pathways to ensure swift, coordinated action rather than chaos when attacks occur, coupled with pre-bunking strategies acting as cognitive vaccines before high-risk periods. And finally, it's beneficial to run simulated drills of AI-enabled attacks, as this is vital for not only building institutional muscle memory, but also for revealing hidden vulnerabilities, like communication breakthroughs that only appear under stress, to be able to address them ahead of time. So pillar 3 is incident management when an attack happens, which they're going to do. Predetermined responses transform chaos into coordination. When synthetic content surfaces claiming ministerial corruption, for example, technical verification, public communications, and legal responses should all be happening immediately and simultaneously to address them. And this means establishing a well-defined command structure to prevent organizational paralysis by ensuring everybody knows their role to play when primary channels are compromised. It also means having a rapid threat assessment framework in place to distinguish between low-level and high-level threats that will require different responses, such as, for example, general nuisance content on social media versus more sophisticated attacks directly targeting staff. In addition, having and maintaining strategic external partnerships that multiply defensive capabilities are valuable, as there was discussed before. Being part of a larger network is hugely helpful for not only being able to prepare for attacks, but to respond to them. And also looking at external partnerships, such as fact-checking organizations who can help rapidly debunk content, or media partners who can monitor and engage in a narrative spread faster than any signal organization could alone, are crucial for addressing some of these issues. Pillar 4 is recovery, so thinking about the long game. The recovery from an AI-enabled cyber attack is an event, but an ongoing process requiring sustained vigilance and support. Post-attack vigilance is crucial, as attackers will often wait months before deploying deepfakes from stolen data, hoping defenses relax. And attacks should also trigger review sessions to ensure protocols and responses are appropriate and up to date. So resilience continue in the long term. And this is particularly important for AI-enabled attacks because this technology is constantly changing. I can tell you that the video that we shared at the beginning, the little 30-second clip, that's already out of date. That is not the best that's out there anymore. And that's going to continue to be the case. And so making sure that you're constantly updating and improving your protocols and responses is a critical part of ensuring continuous resilience. Pillar 5 is infrastructure, so the technical background. And I won't speak too much to this because it's already been greatly discussed by other speakers, but technical infrastructure multiplies human capabilities. Small security teams with the technical expertise can protect against attacks targeting hundreds of individuals simultaneously. And so that means technical tools and techniques such as the ones already mentioned during this webinar are invaluable parts of the toolkit that I cannot overemphasize their importance and help block a lot of attacks from succeeding in the first place or ensure successful attacks remain contained and restrained. And then the final pillar is governance, so making it stick. Without governance, all other measures degrade. Leadership commitment transforms temporary responses into permanent resilience. So this could be appointing dedicated AI security leadership to ensure a sustained focus rather than ad hoc responses that fade between incidences. I would also recommend establishing cross-functional groups across IT, communications, and policy to help break down silos, which attackers will aim to exploit. And then the last is to encourage a cybersecurity conscious culture that is aware of the threat posed by AI-enabled cyber attacks, making every individual an active defender rather than a passive target. So ultimately, this advice, as you can tell, is largely echoing the other speakers by saying that the question really isn't whether your department or institution will face AI-enabled attacks, it's whether you'll be ready when they arrive. And building a robust resilience is achievable by employing a comprehensive framework from basic authentication to strategic governance. And doing this can and will significantly decrease your vulnerability to AI-enabled cyber attacks. So that's a lot of information and a lot to process, and it's a good thing we've had this recorded. But as a final takeaway, here are just some suggested quick actions, quick as in quick to mention, to focus on in the next month, quarter, and the rest of your year to start building resilience against weaponized synthetic content now. So for this next month, begin to establish simple verification protocols such as passcodes or multi-channel verification methods with colleagues. This next quarter, think about educating yourself and your team on AI capabilities and limitations, even if that is just starting out by reading relevant government or news articles to familiarize yourself with the topic, so you understand what the capabilities and limitations of generative AI technology are. And then before the end of the year, try to conduct your first scenario, threat scenario exercise, no matter how minor. It could be, sending an AI generated email, or let's say having an AI voice call. So no matter how minor, to begin to sort of experience what that's like and how we respond to it, and then begin developing incident response plans off the back of that. And that is everything from me. Thank you so much for listening to all of this, and I will now turn it back over to the team.
Guy, that was excellent. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise in this area. Much appreciated, and some great comments in the chat. Appreciate that some have needed to hop on the next, but I'm really pleased that we've got a good time now for the Q&A panel, and we have been collecting some of the questions in the chat. So I'd love to invite our guest speakers that are still online to pop their cameras on, and I think we're going to go to some of those now. Di, I'm going to take liberties and just jump in and ask you a first question, actually, just off the back of that, which is really around general use of apps such as ChatGPT and all those kinds of things that we might be using on a daily basis, either in the workplace or at home in our personal lives. What are some of the risks that we perhaps need to be aware of, if there are any in particular, when we're starting to integrate sort of large language models and everyday AI into our lives and our working routines?
Gosh, that's a great question. So I think one of the biggest risks you want to be aware of is one, data protection, and being very clear about what kind of data is being analyzed and then possibly saved by the LLM. Quite a few of the large LLMs will say that they don't save your data, depending on how you're using it, which I would believe in those scenarios, but it is worth really reading through the terms and conditions to make sure that that is the case, and that's the case for the type of product you're using. Another would be, I would be very careful about taking specific advice about cybersecurity attacks from LLMs, as they've been known to hallucinate tools that don't exist. And this is actually something that cyber criminals has taken advantage of, to create fake tools and have them available for use as seemingly useful tools, but actually malware. So do be very careful with that. Otherwise, I think there's a lot of great benefits of using AI in the workplace, and I think there's a lot of safe and secure ways to do it. And a lot of that is, again, going to go, be addressed by really straightforward, fundamental cybersecurity procedures. And so as long as you're making sure you're following those as well, you're going to take care of 99% of the cases. So I hope that's a useful response.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. And we've got plenty of other questions to pose to you a bit later on. But just to move back up the train, Adam and Alex, I wonder if you both might want to comment on this. Adam, perhaps you want to go first. It came in while you were speaking, in terms of what is the guidance on the question of how to communicate with cyber attackers if they make contact with you, and whether to pay any ransom demands?
Thanks, Liana. Thankfully, I've done a lot. I've never been in a position of negotiating with the hackers. The fundamental line, everything that you read from be that NCSC is our technical authority in the UK, other countries, don't pay. There's lots of very good reasons for that. We know people do, and so you can understand that. There's legislation going through Parliament at the moment which will forbid, if that's the right word, government organisations, arm's length bodies, public sector organisations from paying the ransom. So that's the second part of the question. In terms of how to engage, and I think it is really important to bear in mind that actually engaging with attackers, with those threat actors, is an important consideration for the senior team, because often you kind of get them to back down. You know, they might not realise the organisation they've targeted, but what I would say is use the experts to do that. So one of the key things that the NCSC would say, I don't know if Jonathan's still on, is, you know, ensure that you've engaged with a cyber incident response company, a CIR company, one of the ones listed on NCSC before the attack. I would say it's easier to negotiate a contract when you or cheaper when you don't need it than it is in the heat of the moment. So certainly build in the potential for having to liaise and negotiate, but do that through people who know what they're doing, and yeah, don't pay the ransom. I don't know, Alex, if you would. Well, I'll hand over to Alex.
You never pay the ransom, and there's a reason why the government's putting the legislation through right now. If you were to pay the ransom, there's no guarantee you will have a restoration of services. You might just get another demand for more Bitcoin, and it encourages the same kind of behaviour from those kinds of criminals to keep doing it and to do it to everyone else, because, you know, you've just proved to them they can get paid for it. How you communicate, it kind of depends on what the opportunity is and how you're being approached. I think the answer is it depends. You can get into a dialogue, but you really need specialist support for that. And I'm not going to get into specifics because it's so subjective.
Thank you both very much for those answers. Really helpful and interesting to watch the space on the legislation as well, which is good. Thank you for that question. I just want to pick up on one that we had early on in the session, which was with regards to JESIP's joint online learning, JOL, and also asking about the use of the platform, particularly in terms of sharing learning from cyber exercising and cyber incidents, and whether the digest and JOL sort of speak to each other. I just wanted to take the opportunity really to emphasise that we partner really closely with the JESIP team and with those working specifically on JOL. The digest has been in partnership with them since the beginning, the UKRA equally so, and we fully endorse and encourage the use of JOL to upload lessons for those who have access to that. I think the difference with the digest is that in the spirit of whole society resilience, we really wanted to make this publication public facing. And in order to do that, the easiest way is to take the many, many thousands of public facing lessons and bring them into a shared space for analysis, hopefully to save you some time and energy, and really drill down some of those key lessons that you can take away and start to apply more quickly. So because of that, JOL is available to responder organisations via Resilience Direct. So if you do have that, please do use it. But it's not quite the same. It provides an area for organisations to share their own learning without that needing to be in the public domain. So that's the main difference, but we're absolutely working hand in hand and do speak to each other on a regular basis. So thank you so much for the question on that. And no doubt JOL team are taking an overview at the national level where there is particular themes or trends emerging around this topic. So thank you for that. Just looking over the other questions that we've got, I wanted to pick up on one in relation, Di, back to you in terms of AI. And actually, to be fair, I think I'd like to bring all the speakers in on this. It's about the ability of AI in particular, but I know it can be an attack method as well, to overwhelm a system. And the question is, in relation to the risk of generative AI being used to overwhelm websites, is there a growing risk of generative AI being aimed at other systems to overwhelm them, such as call centres and 999 systems? So a particularly critical question here for some of our responder organisations. Di, would you like to come in first? And then I'm aware other guest speakers may want to take a view on that as well.
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say the risk is real and growing. The capability is definitely there. It's more about, is that the intent of the attackers? Just as we were saying that AI can generate fake website traffic, it's very, 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 I cannot emphasize how easy it is these days to create fake AI voices, either pre-recorded or using live masking technology to make your voice sound like someone else's, and to overwhelm phone systems. We could have AI voice bots that hold convincing conversations for minutes, potentially flooding 999 or call centers with fake emergencies or queries that operators wouldn't be able to really distinguish from, at least not quickly enough. And this threat extends beyond simple volume. You can have AI generating contextually appropriate distress calls with voices, accents, scenarios. I've heard some of these ones, for example, fake AI kidnappings, where fake kidnapper calls and pretends to have kidnapped a loved one, and they're so incredibly realistic and can be altered on a dime. And so it's definitely an issue that could happen. It's definitely a problem, risk that could happen. So it's something to think about. But I would say that the same resilience principles apply from the presentation. You want technical defenses for automated pattern detection in case, let's say, someone's using a not very good AI tool and you can catch it. It's a low quality tool. And then human protocols for verification procedures can also help trip up some of these responses. And so I guess some specific advice I would give off the top of my head would be, depending on if this is possible, try to implement callback verification, which I know you can't really do with 999, but should be possible for other call centers. Create overflow protocols. So you've got, if there's a surge capacity plan in place, that will at least allow you to take in calls of real people as well. Establish priority channels, and then try to monitor for patterns. Like, were you expecting these calls to happen and this surge to happen, or is this unusual? Has, let's say, a similar attack happened recently, and therefore maybe you need to be more aware, and this is where that sort of communication with your network and other organizations can come in. But yeah, I think this is a great question. It's definitely something to think about in the future.
Brilliant, thank you. Did Alex, Adam, did either of you want to come in on that at all?
Yeah, happy to. I'm really interested in the prospect of emergency services being overwhelmed by, I used to work for the Met Police and I was on the Surrey Police and Crime Panel. There's a few different ways. I think what Di just said there about having protocols where you have overflow, having historical data, where are you expecting this pattern? And triage will be really important. So how does a 999 call handler very quickly triage a call and learn to spot the kind of repeat behaviors that an AI will be relying upon to do that? There's also something that occurred to me which counters spam emails, not the same thing, but you have honeypots, where you are setting up traps for mass marketing emails that might be spear phishing or whatever. Now, it'd be interesting if there's something that you could do possibly with voice channels. I think that would be really interesting. Very difficult when you've got a fixed phone number like 999. But I think agentic AI, which is what this is as an attack vector, has already been used to counter criminals. There's a brilliant example I saw where you have call centers that will call up elderly people to try and scam them. And this tool will get a number out there that they'll put it on a list, make sure that these scammers are calling that number, and they will just have a bot keep them talking for as long as possible. And it was incredibly difficult to tell it apart from a person. And this is pretending to be a confused old person who will keep that scammer on the phone for hours if they continue to engage with them. And the campaign was brilliant, the media campaign, because you can hear the scammers getting upset and frustrated and saying, "Oh, you're just wasting my time," because they are just being kept going by a bot for as long as possible to divert them away from actual vulnerable people. Now, how can we use that clever innovation with inbound emergency services honeypots? I don't know, but that's hopefully counter-agentic AI will be a feature in that.
Brilliant, thank you. Adam, did you want to add?
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's a really good question, and I think intent. So something about there's the capability, but is there the intent? And it's the same we see, just because it's possible in the research world, we're not seeing it exploited in the wild. But I think this is a really important one to think about. And I'm not going to add any more on the sort of 999 piece. I think Alex has covered that really well. But actually, just think about what that means for your customer service centre. If actually there was, if it was targeted, if you had a cyber attack and then layered with an AI-driven, essentially denial of service attack against your phone line, that would complicate things even further. What would it mean actually if it was your service desk, your IT service desk, that was overwhelmed alongside a cyber attack, which would then delay the building of an understanding how bad it was? So actually, if you were wanting to maximize the impact from cyber, or actually using the cyber vector alongside a physical safety or security incident, they could cause additional harm. So I think in addition to what people say, I think there's something about thinking about the layers of the threat vectors and the impacts in that way.
That's brilliant. Thank you all for your responses on that. We're going to just take a couple of last questions now. There's one I just want to highlight broadly about getting the buy-in and the attention of senior leaders for people who are rolling out training sessions and delivering high quality content, but are concerned that they might not get the buy-in they need to really affect the change. Alex, I wonder what your thought would be on that. It must be something that different councils have to contend with and overcome.
Yeah, it's something that I've really campaigned on for the last 6 years now, that typically in politics and government, leaders are focused on governance, finance, the message. They want to communicate with people about, what the priorities are that are, good stuff, difficult stuff, what costs money. And, cyber often gets lost in that, or you get a quite generic line on it. I think that every person in a position of leadership should understand it. For example, we saw something recently from central government where they've said that every civil servant should have some form of AI training. I think that's really, really interesting. That way of looking at it as everybody needs to be able to understand this. It's not until it happens, I think, in many cases, that people in leadership positions realize the situation they're in, how bad it is, what it means for them. And the LGA does a lot of work on its AI masterclass, its cyber masterclass, its cyber 360, its digital 360, its leadership classes, to try and get people in those positions of responsibility to understand it much, much better. A lot of it's education. A lot of it is, competing priorities. You're trying to lobby against lots of other issues right now in local government, children's services, adult social care, local government reorganisation, and fair funding are really dominating the headlines. But as soon as a big council gets hit, we saw it with Glasgow this week, that's it. That's all the newspaper wants, the media sites want to talk about. And I actually did a little bit of a write-up and had a chat with some people before this meeting to see what they're doing. And it really is about isolating the potentially harmful servers, figuring out very quickly what's going on, and getting your leadership to communicate, get that communication out there. Here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's when we'll know more, here's what we expect, telling people this is what's safe, this is what's not safe. And that has to be something that more than just the media team are doing. You have to be able to get political leaders confident enough to stand in front of a camera and explain what's going on and why, and to do that authentically. I'm a little anxious being on this call because I don't know what questions I'm going to get or if I can answer them. But you just have to be able to try and do your best, and face it, because otherwise that vacuum just is filled by gossip, and that can be even more dangerous.
Thank you very much, and for taking questions when you don't know what's coming. It's really great to hear from that experience and what others are doing too. Adam, a very quick one to you. If an organisation thinks or knows they've just realised they've been breached, what's the top 0-minute action they can take, the best one to mitigate further harm?
Yeah, I saw that come up in the chat, and I think I'm going to use Alex's answer, which is it depends. So in terms of what you know and what you think, people say, pull the plug, go immediately go into island mode or immediately go into containment, and that might be appropriate. The important thing is to think through what are those, we call them all indicator of compromise. Apologies to sort of using jargon there for people on in this space, but what are those things? How would you know what that looks like? What are the what are the how might you know that you are under attack or you can't rule it out? And it's about thinking through with your IT teams, with your third-party providers, managed service providers, actually what options have we got available to us, and then who's got delegated authority to do some of those technical things. But my point about going big and going fast is about establishing that response. So it's about bringing people together. But as you know, with any emergency response, there are, I always think of them as swim lanes. There's people that are doing certain things, and so the short answer is it depends. But to have thought it through, to work out what are the systems, what are those indicators of compromise, what are the tools we've got available, who's got authority to do that. There are implications to pulling the plug, financial, potentially impactful on communities and individuals. So think it through and agree it in advance.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, we do have a lot of other questions. Di, there are some specifically for yourself as well. And I think what we'll need to do is maybe take those offline, if that's all right, and then put some answers on the website with the Digest 6 information when we get there. I would just like to highlight that within the Digest, I know that we are, and every time we write one, that we are writing for everybody, for as many people as we can reach, and that cyber, whilst we've demonstrated, actually there's a lot of things that we can do as individuals, teams, and organisations that are of a more basic nature in terms of our security. It is something that can be highly technical as well. And so I just wanted to point out that within the Digest, we have got a cyber resilience introduction or a primer, which is a couple of pages, which just takes you through the different types of attacks that might commonly come up, or that you could be certainly at risk to. And there is also lots of information and signposting to National Cyber Security Centre's website. They do have a helpful glossary. Equally, our local government association, there's a lot of great case studies that can be drawn on there to help support your cyber resilience. And finally, as you will have seen if you just answered the poll question, a very shameless plug here for our brand new podcast. The UK Resilience Academy has recently launched Resilience in the Round, and whilst it doesn't have an explicit cyber focus, we will be covering a range of topics, and that is available for you on all your favourite streaming platforms, as well as our website, of course. So I think I'll just take this moment to say thank you very much, Di, Adam, Alex, Hamish, for your introduction. Although Jonathan has had to leave us, I just want to extend our thanks corporately to him for his keynote. And finally, thank you so much to all of those online joining us, commenting in the chat. We hope you found it a really helpful webinar. We will be sending the link to watch back to your email addresses, and we'll be posting this on our website within the next couple of weeks. So keep a lookout for that. And in the meantime, the QR code is there if you're still yet to download your PDF edition. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.